everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Halt and Catch Fire rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something that I call Take the Doughnut, which for me is an expression that is the same as Carpe Diem. It's all about going after the things you want in life. So this year, what I wanted to do was rewatch the show Halt and Catch Fire, but this time talk about it with people, which has been a novelty for me. And we're up leveling this now because I'm getting a chance to talk with people who actually worked on the show. And before I introduce my guest for today, just one quick housekeeping item. If you are brand new to the show, the episode recaps are safe for you. They are spoiler-free up until the episode that you're on. But if you're listening to any of these interviews, including this one, they could be spoiler-filled. So just be aware of that up front. We will probably bring up details that are in future episodes of the show from where I am in the episode recaps. Having said all that, I'm really excited to welcome my guest for today, who is Mark O'Brien, who played Tom Rendon for 15 episodes on this show from seasons 2 through 4. Welcome to this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is cool.
I'm so glad that you were available to do this. And I have a ton of questions about the show, but I think the place to start with this is, what was your process for getting onto the show to begin with?
It was crazy. So I'm from Newfoundland, which is in Canada, and I was living in Toronto at the time, and I just moved to LA. And any actor from England, Australia, Canada, those are the most, like, you get a big influx of actors coming from those places. Everyone wants to book their first American job, and you're like, what will it be? What will it be? And I remember I was here like 10 days and I got this audition, and I hadn't heard of the show because season 1 had just come out not long before or whatever. But I was a big fan of Scoot McNairy and Lee Pace. And so I was just like, and then I watched like the first episode. I was like, wow, this show's like really cool. It's really good, like very much my style. And I had a fever that day, and I was really not feeling well. And my wife was like, oh, just go. And so I just went and auditioned, and it felt so good. I was like, man, I felt really, really good. Like, I really want this. And then that night I found out I got it. So it was really crazy. So for all my Canadian friends, they were like, oh, like, that's amazing. Sometimes it takes years. And I certainly have struggled throughout my career as an actor, like any actor has. But that was one of the best breaks I ever got, because it was very surprising.
That also sounds really fast in terms of like just the one job from beginning to end of your process to get on the show. That sounds like light speed.
Yeah, I don't know that, I can't remember. That's so crazy that it was 9 years ago that I got on it. Because it's 10 years since the show started. And I just knew that I was the choice or whatever, is kind of what I was told. I remember it was that night, and I was like, oh my God. And then, of course, like, then I had a chat with Chris Cantwell and Chris Rogers, the creators of the show. And I just had a chat with them about where the character would go and kind of what they were thinking of. And I went through that, and I was only supposed to be in 6 episodes. That was the original deal, was at least 6. And then once I started filming, I kind of was like, I think this guy's gonna be around a bit longer. Like, it just made sense from just a story point. So it was wild getting on the show. And it was, I'll tell you a really crazy thing, and quite apt for what the show was about. So I'd seen the first episode, like I said, and then in the meantime, I think I left like a week later to Atlanta, where we shot. And I just watched the whole series. I watched the other 9 episodes relatively quickly. And then I remember finishing the last one, like the day I arrived in Atlanta. I had a fitting. I remember I finished the last one, which I was kind of planning. I was like, I kind of want to be right in it. And then they were like, oh, your scene is actually up early. So I went straight to set, and I did a scene where the first time you actually meet my character, with Mackenzie Davis and Carrie Bichet. And it was like stepping into a video game, because I was like, I just watched this show, like, I didn't know them, and I wasn't aware of their work, so I just stepped in, so it was completely foreign. I was like, this is so weird. I was just watching this video game, and now I'm on the video game that day, and I was really just thrown. I didn't know what I was doing.
That's perfect energy to bring in, given how your character starts, because it's like, Donna, Cameron, big fan. And it was the same thing for Tom Rendon.
Yeah, essentially. And I was like, and it's funny when you join a show. I've been on shows where I start from the beginning. I've been on shows where you come in later, and you don't know the vibe and how everyone's getting along, and does everyone like everyone. And so almost some of the social aspects are almost going through your head even more than the work you have to do, because you're like, I kind of just arrived here, and everyone's like, you're from Canada, even though Mackenzie's from Canada as well. But still, it was like, Like it was just all very, very odd. And it was a thrill. I think back to that all the time with very fond like memories. Yeah.
Well, I can already tell. I mean, if you asked me to recall in detail something that happened to me 9 years ago, I don't know that I'd have as much as you just gave. So I'm
I'm floored. I'm
very
floored that I
excited
remembered all
for
that.
this conversation.
Yeah.
I have all these questions, but I'm going to slide one up here because you said you knew you were on the show for 6 episodes, and I'm trying to mentally calculate where that arc would have stopped you, although it probably changed. So, how much did you know or think you knew at that time about what was coming ahead for Tom?
Very little. Like I knew that I was kind of the new guy on the scene in there, and I knew that there was going to be some sort of potential. This is what you're always told when because people don't want to promise you anything. It's what I would tell someone as well. It's like you're kind of like you might be a love interest to Mackenzie Davis's character, and that was all I knew. And you know, and probably because a lot of those answers weren't solidified yet anyway, so they probably didn't want to say anything certain. And then it just kind of grew, and it became really different and kind of and really interesting because certain shows when you come on, because technically I was considered they have this like irregular recurring or whatever. I signed an option actually, so it was kind of sort of a regular but kind of not. So you don't really know what your place is in terms of like, will I just be someone? Oh, sorry, my battery's going. So something. Oh, there you are. You're back again. You're kind of like, will I be around longer, or will I just be a person here for that other character, or will my character have their own kind of life as well? Kind of never know those things. So I really wasn't certain at all, to tell you the truth.
Hmm. Let's take a second to zoom out a little bit on this before we get back into the show, because you've been on a lot of sets in your career. You've been on worked on a lot of TV shows, a lot of films. How does this one feel different to you? Is there anything in particular that strikes you when you think back to this time as being unusual?
I think back to this time all the time. I think it was the most specific time of my entire career in a lot of ways because I just moved to the States and because I just got the job that I loved, and to speak back to like, will everyone get along? Everyone got along famously. I mean, Mackenzie, Scoot, and Lee all lived together for a few seasons at least. We were all very close and got to know each other really well. And same with the creators and the producers and Jeff Freilich and Melissa Bernstein. Like it was just on and on. And then the camera ops and the DPs, like everybody got along very, very well. And all the coders that worked in Mutiny, it was a really harmonious vibe. So it really paralleled kind of what was happening on the show in a way. It was like everyone was one big group, and it was almost like a very free, liberating feeling. It was like we didn't have marks on the floor. A lot of it's handheld. The show, so you kind of just like did whatever, and everyone was really open to that. There was a real energy to the show, and that was probably led by Chris Rogers and Chris Canwell because they were quite young too when it started, and everyone was just really invigorated. And AMC would come, and I became good friends with some of the people at AMC, and they were young and excited too. But then they had people who were veterans who were excited as well. So it was a really cool time, especially for AMC, because they were just coming off Breaking Bad and Mad Men, and it was kind of like a time where you could really take chances because they'd already like hit their home runs. And so it's very fond for me. I think about it often.
Oh, that's awesome. Before we get into any specific storylines, when you think about the character Tom Rendon, what would you say his personality is? What sticks out to you about him?
Very certain, a very, very certain person. Like as in like once he knows something, he's like, that's what that is, and that's the way that's going to be. And that's why I thought it was interesting with him and Cameron, Mackenzie's character, because she was really like she was, a techie. She was a technical computer programmer, gamer, and stuff like that. But she was also very, very artistic, very kind of like bohemian in that kind of way of like, let's just try this, and who cares if it doesn't work, and let's fail. And Tom wasn't like that, but I think he liked that spirit of her was probably quite invigorating for him and a change. So I found him to be someone who was really certain in his opinions, really confident, and with a moral compass too, actually. Because anytime like the stuff that would happen with Lee's character, it was like he immediately was like, this guy, this is not okay. You know what I mean? So I think it was someone who was thought of things very black and white, but wanted to think in the gray area, but wasn't quite able to do it.
Hmm. That's an interesting way of looking at it because I feel like they both had him and Tom both have very strong personalities. And so I sort of
Yeah.
mistake that for both of them being certain, but you're right. There was a lot more sort of fluidity to the way she was thinking about things.
Yeah, and I feel like Tom wanted to untuck his shirt, but didn't have the guts to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Having said that, though, I see a lot of professional evolution, development, evolution for Tom over the course of your whole time on the show. And just to sort of paint the picture here, when we first see Tom, he's hacking into Mutiny to sort of get their attention. He's copying and improving, whatever you want to say, their game. And then he's putting out work that isn't copyright protected because he's stealing it. And he sort of believes in that spirit of things. But then, eventually he becomes somebody who works for, I think it was Sega,
Yes.
in what seems to be a pretty high level job. And he gets to a point where, when we have a conversation between basically all the main characters, Joe and Gordon, Don and Cam and Tom are in the same room talking about the future of basically the World Wide Web. Tom is talking about not being okay with open source model. It's to me, a huge shift,
Yeah.
but one that kind of makes sense. So how do you see his professional development as you look at him through the course of the show?
Well, I think his professional development was hugely influenced by his personal development too. And when he sees something like something that's open and, you know what I mean, let's try something that could damage a lot. I think it just triggers him into Joe and everything that Joe would do. You know what I mean? It was very Joe self-serving is what I think he thought of Joe a lot. Joe's doing these things, he doesn't realize the consequences. Like, you know what I mean? Even when, he went to my mother's house at one point, and it's just like you don't understand what that does, what that means to someone else. And Joe is sort of like, I wouldn't say, I don't know that he was incapable of thinking that way, but he was incapable from Tom's perspective of thinking that way. So I think as soon as something like that comes up, it's like, I saw you destroy a company. I saw it. So I don't think it's a good idea. So I think it's hard for him to control his emotions in that way. And that episode, which is a great script, that's a really great script, that episode, and well performed. And I love that episode very, very much. And Lee was so good in that episode because he's calm with me, and I'm not calm because it's very frustrating. He's very frustrating, and I know he's smart, and I know he has a history with Cameron, so he can't really separate the two as much as I think he would like to.
Yeah. When we talk about development, I'm working on a theory here in this rewatch that Tom is basically Cam a season ago at like most points in his story. I don't know if that'll hold up, but it does in the
That's
beginning. Good. And when you think about it, like, first of all, their upbringings, there's challenge in both of their upbringings in not a dissimilar way, actually. And then when they both get started on the show at their respective starting points, they're in a relationship with the boss or getting into one. They're starting out, they're more the type of people who are going to sort of break things and hack their way into things, and then over time, as they start developing leadership roles, they're going to be a little safer in that. So there's like this interesting shift that happens that I don't know if it'll split off at some point in the future, but so far it has felt like there's alignment. And I'm curious if that's something that ever came up as you were working on this show.
No, that's a great and I think very accurate theory. That's crazy. How did you think of that? That's really good.
Because I've been wondering how much of a Tom defender I need to be. Because I feel like there's probably a lot of Lee Pace fans out there, but so far people are totally willing to hear how much I love the character Tom Rendon. And when I sat with it, I was like, oh my God, is he Cam? It's like, wait a minute.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I think, first of all, it was so funny because so many people were like, because I know that, right? I had friends watching it and you see certain things online and it's like, shoot, Tom, because I was like, they were together first, but I'm like, what has he done that's bad? You know what I mean? It was like, this guy's done nothing bad. He's just gotten in the way of a relationship that was fun to probably be a part of and to view. And I don't care, like, if someone likes me or anything, like, that's, you get over that day one. But it's more like, I was like, he hasn't done anything wrong. And I was like, but he's not exciting. He's not as exciting as what I think, Joe offers and is willing to risk and everything like that. But I will say that that's really interesting, your theory, because I think it's kind of true. But maybe that's what like creativity kind of does to you. You see someone else do something and you can't help but be impacted by it or infected by it to some degree. So being around her, it's kind of like, I don't know, like he was a bit further behind in his risk taking until he met her. So perhaps like that just influenced him to some sort of way. And Cameron's character is like that. She's so like just interesting. So it's like, I don't know, when you're around interesting people, you sometimes pick up on their habits or their actions. And maybe there's something in there, but it was never discussed. But I think that's fascinating because it's really accurate.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if it bears out once we get like further into season 3, but the parallels have been lining up pretty well so far. So
Yeah.
when I think about your comment earlier about sort of having that moral compass, so we're going to get a situation where Gordon introduces Sonaris to Mutiny, and it is a bad introduction. It basically is a virus that wipes out all of Mutiny's games. It's a big crisis. And Mutiny is in huge trouble. They can't make payroll. And so there's this whole discussion amongst the team that, look, we can't make payroll. So if you want to keep working here, we would love that. We need that, but you'd have to work for shares. We're going to find out that Tom is really financially struggling at that point, but is actually the first person to raise his hand to say, I'm staying here, and ends up taking a night job secretly. What do you think keeps him at Mutiny?
I think it's something he's never been a part of before. He's number crunching. Like I said, everything's black and white, but he's attracted to the gray. And I think that was the gray where it was like, there's something happening here. And especially that time, like 80s computer world, it's fascinating. Things are changing very quickly in a way that the rest of the world isn't changing in that way. Like right now, everything's always changing. Like everything's changing for us in every direction in the present day. But back then it was like computer technology is what has led to all the changes that happen today. But back then it was really just that. I think it was probably just fascinating to him. And that's the way I thought about it, that he's just like, this is sort of like a fantasy in a way that I think before he would have been afraid to act on, where it's like, yeah, I'll like steal people's games and I'll do that kind of stuff. But like, that's for fun because I know bet more than them and I'm going to prove it, and sort of a fun challenge just for yourself. But I think once he was there, it's like, I'm with this beautiful, wild girl who has these amazing ideas, and she's so interesting in what she's creating, and she's right. And my God, this might never come along again. It's probably what he dreamed of in his bed 3 years ago, like, trying to sleep and be like, imagine if something like that happened. That's what I always kind of felt it. Like this was like his dream, because it went against his, it's like the Neo in the Matrix kind of thing. It's like, you could go into this crazy world and scary, or you can stay in this boring one where it's safe.
And I'm curious, coming off of that, so I agree that Tom had that energy through most of season 2, but your very first episode in, Tom seems kind of like, this is Mutiny. And yeah. I'm wondering what you thought of with that energy. It seemed like a very specific choice or direction that was in the script. So what was that coming from?
I think it was like coming into a situation, like for me, approaching as an actor, I thought of it as like someone coming into a situation who already kind of knows I probably know more than these people because I proved it already. And I want to make my stamp here. Like I want to make a point here. And I think it's also like he's someone who, when someone says something wrong, it's frustrating. Like when she created that game, I'm just remembering it now. God, I can't believe it's 9 years ago.
Parallax.
Parallax. And I'm like, this game sucks, essentially. I'm like, throw it in your box or whatever. I remember, wow, I can't, yeah, anyway, that feels like a lifetime ago. But I remember doing that, and it was like, this is frustrating that you're wrong. I still want to be here. This is still interesting, but it's frustrating how wrong you are. And I know that you're wrong. And I think he's kind of proven to be correct in that estimation. But that's the way I kind of thought about it. It's like, I got to come in and show these people that I know what I'm doing, because I don't know these people at all. I've never taken a risk like this in my life. And also, as soon as they're wrong, it's frustrating. And I kind of have that in me a little bit, probably too. Where I'm like, nope, that's not actually exactly what happened. But either way, that's the way I thought about it. And those were like my first few days on the set. So it was it was fun, but also like, oh, I hope this works. But it was what kind of came out naturally. I still really like that scene because yeah, I was throwing a tennis ball against the wall. I remember, and I remember just picking it up and being like, "Can I just throw this?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Great." And that was the kind of set it was. But that's kind of where it came from, I think, as far as my memory serves me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lining up really well so far. I'll tell you that much.
So,
I can't
yeah.
believe this. I'm one of the things that I think is really interesting about this show is all the power dynamic shifting that happens. When I think about the situation for Cam, she's coming off a relationship with Joe in season 1 that feels very uneven in terms of the power dynamics to me. It was one of the reasons I was very glad that Tom came in. I mean, she's having a relationship with her boss, and it at all points feels like is he tricking her now? Is he tricking her next episode? It's always kind of feels like that when they first get together. With Tom, I'm debating what the power dynamic was, and I'm curious what your viewpoint on this was, because when they first get together, Cam is Tom's boss. But some of those early scenes, like a moment that drew you very close together, is Tom basically rescues her from a panic attack. And they get to a point where they co-create a game together, and Cam has not co-created anything to this point in the show that we know of. So, like, what was that power dynamic in your eyes? Did you see it as like give and take, even, uneven?
I think it was pretty even. I think that kind of happens, like I guess the way I look at it is that when you fall in love with someone, you want to share everything right away. And I think that that was probably what was happening to them, that it was just like, let's just do it. I don't think they were thinking about it. It was just, man, I'm crazy about this person and she's crazy about me, I think. And I've never felt this way. And she's probably never felt this particular way. So it's like, let's just keep going. We're both really good at this and we think the same way. And like, we're finishing each other's sentences. So let's just go. And that's what's cool about the show, because then it gets complicated, right? Then it gets tricky. And then I can't remember what happened. There's an episode not long after that where I remember I ride away on a bike and I'm like, you did this to yourself. She did something. She got a Joe involved or something in some sort of way. I can't remember. Do you remember?
Joe hangs around all the time. I mean, there was a situation where like one really critical moment is that she ends up selling Extract and Defend to the game that you create together. So I think that's yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell? So it's like, that's a great example of like, it's like the social network kind of idea. It's like things it's fun in the beginning creating, but then things get complicated. And she is the boss. And I remember that episode actually, because it was like, I'm disappointed not just in us and in the fact that you sold her game and like, I mean, it wasn't what we kind of agreed upon. It's not really what we talked about. I was like disappointed in her. It's like, wow, oh, I didn't know you were like that. And I feel like every time something happened that I didn't like in her, it was because I'm like, oh, that's Joe. That's just Joe.
A season earlier, like, Joe had to do that with her because they sold at Comdex, they had to figure out a way to sell the Giant. And so they removed her operating system. Yes. And it's effectively the same thing where it was like, this is probably the correct business choice because this company needs money right now. But it doesn't feel good to be on the end of like, I'm making your part of this project go away and I'm not really consulting you on it. So it's like the same feeling, but she's doing it to Tom now instead of having this situation being done to her.
Yeah. And then maybe that's where that comes from. Like, you get your bad ideas from people too, you know what I mean? So I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it, but yeah, it's interesting how those things happen. Things get complicated. You start working together on something and then it's like, well, who said what when and whose idea was whose, and we said this and you said that, and I mean that's the beauty of the show is those like intricacies of those relationships and those artistic and creative decisions.
Yeah, and you've touched on it a little bit, but the specter of Joe is just sort of hanging over their relationship for like almost the entire thing. So how did Tom see Joe, and did that evolve over time?
I think I think Tom saw Joe as like a giant. It's just like this guy is really smart. I mean, Lee Pace playing that role does so much to it as well because Lee has such a presence. he has this magnificent presence as an actor, and you don't know what he's going to do in the scene in a lovely way and not a showy way, and he wants to do every take differently or anything like that. It's like, no, he's just like surprising. And I think, and he's big, he's a big dude, and I'm not small, but I'm not as big as Lee Pace, and he's probably 2 inches taller than me, and you know, you just, and he's broad shouldered, you're just like, oh, he's a big guy, and on the show he's achieved a lot, and he's achieved her. Like, it's like she liked him, and like, it's almost like, I think a lot of people go through this when you find out, if you see like an ex's, like, or you're the person you're with, their ex or something, you're like, whoa, like that's pretty good. Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like there was like this thing of like, and he was impenetrable. I feel like for Tom, it's like, I don't know how I can be better than him. I don't know how I can be smarter than him, because he's always going to do something I didn't think of, whether it's good or bad, and I can't understand him. I can't penetrate him at all. There was one scene where we tried to trick Joe into the video game thing, where we faked the inside of this computer and everything. We had like a tape recorder, like we faked the whole thing. It's a really fun episode. And at the end of the episode, Joe finds the cord and it's connected to something, and he opens up the computer and sees that it's basically all bullshit. So Lee did that scene, and the cord was leading around the room. So he's like doing it, and like stuff's pulling over, and he moves it around. And then he's supposed to, he says a line and he leaves. And you know, in the scene, we're all kind of, we always had like 2 cameras running, so some of it was cross cut when we're shooting. And I remember Lee doing that scene, and he finds, he's so good, and he picks up the cord and he stretches on, and he doesn't even care, because Joe wouldn't care. And Lee's pulling at stuff, and stuff falls over, and I was standing there, I was like, oh God. And then like he pulled at other things, like, because he's pulling this cord to find out where it's plugged in. And then finally pulled it out, and he looked at it, and he held it, and he threw it right at me. Didn't hit me, he wasn't trying to hurt me, but it was great. Like, I was like, oh man, that's such a good choice. It just missed me, but it was like such a middle finger to Tom in such a strong way that kind of like, you know what I mean, umbrella's everything you just talked about. Like, you know what I mean? That said it all. And how does one respond to that? And there's no way for Tom to really respond to that. And there's another time too when I go over to his place, and I'm like, you saw my mother, and he leaves me confused. And it's just like, I don't know how to, I can't win this guy. So that's the way I think he felt about it all the time. And it's even worse because, you know, because of his relationship with Cameron.
Even the very first scene that we saw between Tom and Joe, it was so good. I was just watching this back, and it was like the energy between you two, the decisions of when I'm not going to look at you on purpose, when I am going to look at you, when I'm not going to look at you.
Yeah.
And it was all this. And at the end of the scene, you clearly made coffee for him, and he just hands you the coffee cup, like, you take care of this.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Looking at the coffee cup, like, I guess I have to take care of this now. And I'm just sitting there thinking, is this just like choices that you two are making in the moment? Or is this like galaxy brain level of scripting?
I think that just happened. I think it was just this idea of, I think we fell into a rhythm there. And then did I throw the coffee away?
You end up putting it gingerly down in the sink, like, okay, I'll put this away, but now I'm not going to like it.
Yeah.
Like,
I knew there was some beat at the end, but I think that just happened because it was just, and you're standing next to Lee, and I remember it was a 2-shot, and you could see how much bigger he is than me. And I was just like, he feels so large as a person too, and he's just unconcerned with me. And that's the hardest, when someone's just not concerned. They're not worried at all.
For what it's worth, later in that episode, we see Donna washing out a mug. And I was like, I bet Tom didn't do anything with either mug.
Definitely didn't. Definitely not in that scene.
Nuh-uh, not that one.
I don't think Tom cleaned a mug for the rest of his life after that, probably.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was done.
Oh man. So in terms of this relationship between Tom and Cam and how it develops, you know, I'm trying to figure out when it all went wrong, really, because it feels like there are a bunch of possible points. So there are enough red flags for Tom early enough where he doesn't go to San Francisco initially. Like, Cam won't say I love you back to him. She sold Extract and Defend, didn't talk with him about it. And then after the whole team is moved and Tom stayed in Texas, there's a visit that Cam makes back to Texas. She shows up on Tom's doorstep, and there's a clandestine marriage that happens. She doesn't even tell people that she got married. The audience doesn't even find out she got married right away. So you get back together, you're both in San Francisco for a little while, and then a move is made to Japan, and then it all kind of comes apart. Joe re-enters the scene kind of, but is that where it came apart? So for me, it's like trying to figure out when the disconnect started to happen in your mind. When did that start to happen?
I think it kind of started when their relationship started, because in a way it was always kind of doomed. They're just such different people. Like, you know what I mean? They're so different, Tom and Cameron. They, in a way, they don't really belong together. It was this great conflux of him starting that job at that time, the age they are, the relationships they've come out of. It just seemed like it was always doomed to. I always felt like that. I was like, they're never going to stay together. And then once they stopped working together, I think it got even hairier. So I know that's kind of a weird answer, but I just feel like from the moment they decided to be together, it was like, yeah, it's not gonna work out. And a little piece of trivia, in the original draft of the script where they all move, I was supposed to get on the plane.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. He was supposed to get on the plane, and then they changed it, which I think was better. I think it was more dramatic.
Huh. Okay. Does it seem like it was going to go to the same places, or was that probably too early to
I had no
tell?
idea, because that was the last episode of the season, so I had
Yeah.
no idea. But I remember I got the script, and then everyone was like, "He doesn't get on the plane." I was just like, "Oh well, like everyone was cool about it. It wasn't like you die. It was just like he doesn't get on the plane." I was like, "I think that's juicy." I thought it was good.
It is interesting. It caused a lot of really interesting choices for Cam's character to figure out how to
Yeah,
get Tom back
yeah.
in her life. That's for sure.
Maybe he was just
Hmm.
late. Yeah.
Well, that is good trivia. I like that stuff. I don't know if there's a question here. I just want to thank you for a scene that you were in. So in, what was it, 204, Play with Friends, there's an iconic photo of Mutiny that's taken. You have to take it. You slowly lose your mind as you try to wrangle that group of guys.
Yeah, yeah.
And on a deep dive, I was like pausing and writing down copy and writing down like things you were having to do. And like Lev at one point is like, I can't hear without my glasses. And you're like, you can't hear without your glasses.
I forgot about that.
And
Wow.
I'm just, I don't know. Is there anything you remember about that scene to share it? And if you don't, that's fine. Just thanks.
I do remember doing it. I felt like there were lines in there, but I think everyone was just kind of doing whatever. And I actually felt like Tom probably felt like, I think everyone was just going bananas, which was fun. And I was probably just like, I'm just going to keep saying stuff to get them to do it. And then Josh Hoover slides in his underwear, I remember.
Yes.
And he did not care at all. And he was the life of that scene in a lot of ways, because that's like the button on it. And he was so fun. I loved working with him. I became buddies with him while we were making it. And anyway, you're welcome. And I thought that was a really fun scene too, and just captured the spirit of that kind of youth and that excitement. And it was just a great scene. It was a great idea of a scene too.
There's a lot of blink you miss it stuff in that, because everybody's in it sort of all being featured at the same time. So you
That's
kind of
true.
get
Yeah.
everybody's personality all at once. It's a lot to take in. But
Yeah.
then if you're like pausing the screen, you can actually absorb it all. And there's a lot to it.
It
So
kind of encapsulates everybody, like in the way, yeah, they are in that one scene. That's a good point. Yeah, it's true.
yeah. So, obviously you got a chance to work with a lot of different people on this show. So first, you worked very closely with most of the main cast, maybe not as much Scoot McNairy, but Mackenzie Davis, Carrie Bechet, Toby Huss, plenty of work with Toby Huss, Lee Pace, what can you share about working with any of those folks?
Oh my God, I love them so much. Mackenzie and I became fast friends on that, and it's funny. Like, I don't believe in like chemistry reads when people do that, because I'm like, two good actors will just figure it out. That being said, there is stronger chemistry than other times, and I felt like I don't know that Mackenzie would say the same thing. I hope she better, but like I felt like we were really on the same frequency all the time. We agreed on stuff when we discussed the scene, when we were going through it. We just always felt on the same page, and I just the best time when you're doing those scenes with someone so closely, and not just the intimate scenes, but just someone you're with all the time, the most important thing is to not know what they're going to do, but to know that they're going to make a great choice. And that's what it was like working with her. She's an amazing actress. And her and Carrie are so different, but Carrie's amazing as well in like this totally different kind of way. Um, and I loved working with them. I used to have so much fun working with them and hanging out with them. And Scoot, yeah, I didn't get to work with Scoot that much, but I became friends with Scoot. I was talking to Scoot just a couple weeks ago. Like he's remained a friend, and he was great on the show. And Lee, like I said, Lee Lee was kind of like he was so interesting because I still look up to him and I admire him and I love him as a human being too. But like he wouldn't talk to me as much on set as later, and I think it had something to do with our character. I never really knew what was going on, but his performance was so good. And he was always wonderful. He was lovely, but we would talk much more when we weren't on set. And everyone has their own process, and it worked really well for him. And I really respected that. It wasn't like he was quiet in the corner, you know what I mean? But it was a different experience. And Toby, I love Toby. Toby came over for my birthday party last year. Like I still talk to Toby all the time. He's so, he's like the funniest person in the world. He is absolutely hilarious.
I've
And then
had
he's
a
playing
couple
this
people
role.
tell me stories after we stopped recording that I could not include.
No, I can't even. There's nothing to say. It can't be included. But he's such a raconteur, and he's always telling stories like, "Well, I was down in the blah blah blah," and you're like, "What are you talking about?" And same with the guys in Mutiny, like Josh Hoover and Nick Pupo. Like, it was, I feel like I'm just going through the list of how great everyone was, but it's the truth. Everyone was really wonderful. Alexa Palladino and a lot of these people, like I'm still good friends with, and try and see like as soon anytime I can. And what a lovely thing to have. And I could just go on and on about how great they are as actors, but like everyone on that show was really.
Were there any crew members that you want to shout out? Anybody that you worked with a lot that maybe we don't hear their names enough?
Yeah, the camera operator Glenn, he ended up DPing a show I did in Chicago called 61st Street, and he was a camera op then, and he became the DP, and he was phenomenal. I loved him. I loved him very very much. He was just the greatest guy. And Jeff Freilich, one of the producers, I worked with him on that same series, so I got to work with them again. And I stayed in touch with Chris Rogers and Chris Cantwell, and I think there's anyone else I worked with since then. I can't remember, but I'm sure there have been. But I certainly like when you see each other, it's that thing. It'll never go away of like, oh my God, we had so much fun and that was so great. And that was a great crew. That was a very, very tight crew.
Mm. Are there any, what were your favorite moments on set that come to mind when you think about this show?
I love that first day that we talked about because it was my first day and it was so bizarre and so just like, what the hell are we doing? Like, I have no idea what this is. But I liked it. It was really cool when we were doing stuff and like we were talking about watching Terminator and like there's references to like Tron and like just stuff like that. That was like, oh my God, that's so cool because you felt like you were in the universe of it. Like you really felt like you're in this universe of this show. And I really liked that episode, the Halloween episode where we dress. Is it Halloween? I'm dressed up. I remember. I don't know if it was Halloween, but I'm dressed up as like a army guy. And it was when I tell her I
That was
love
a
her.
mutiny party.
A mutiny
Cam
party, and
didn't
I
dress
told
up
her,
too.
yeah, I tell her I love her, and
Yeah.
I like that episode because it was just like a day. It was like a day in the life of Team Mutiny, and it was so fun because it was like that on set. And there weren't long lighting setups too, so it was just kind of like you just sort of shoot, and then you just keep talking, and then you just sort of shoot, and it really felt like unique. I knew at the time I'd just come off a series for 6 years, so you're really aware of what's unique and what's not, and that was unique. But I love that episode. That mutiny party was really fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what are you up to now? Is there anything that you recently put out or can share that is coming up for you?
Yeah, sure. I that show I did in Chicago, 61st Street, is that's airs on CW now. Starts in July, season 2. I did a movie last year called Shadow of God that I think is coming out later this year. I also just directed my second feature as a writer director that I'm editing now, basically every day. That I'm really excited about. Made my first film, came out in 2021, and so yeah, I've been writing and directing a lot. And I did a film with Adam Agoyan last year and Amanda Seyfried that I don't know when that's coming out. Premiered at TIFF, and I just did a movie called Nuremberg in Budapest about the Nuremberg trials with Russell Crowe and Rami Malek and Michael Shannon and Richard E. Grant and all these really great actors. So yeah, busy. But like if I'm not acting, I'm really writing all the time. and trying to make as many films as I can and just work with great people. That's always my thing. It's just like I just want to work with people that, whether they're famous or not, it's just someone who's a real artist and has something to say, no matter what position you are. That's just what I look for. I did a movie last year that was like for $400,000, and I don't know when it'll get released, and it's one of the best things I've ever done in my career
Oh, wow.
because it was just great artists working together, and that's what Halt and Catch Fire was like.
Yeah, I want to plug a couple things that you've done as well. So I'm a huge horror movie fan, and every October I watch as many as I can. I've topped out at like 85. I think it's ridiculous.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a job.
Oh my God.
I'll be doing this around that time this year, so I don't know what numbers we'll get up to, but I've got a tradition now where the second to last film I watch every October is Ready or Not.
Oh, cool.
Which I guess makes it my second favorite, maybe. I don't know. Probably that's probably why I watched it second to last. So your character was so good in it. You were so good in it. And it's one of those, it's a horror comedy for those who haven't seen it. So whether you like horror or not, it's, I think, a safe entry point for you, relatively speaking. So there's that. But also on the subject of horror movies, the first film that you directed plus wrote plus acted in was The Righteous.
Yeah.
Which I just recently saw, and it was so good.
Oh.
Wow. What a sort of throwback, like atmospheric, suspenseful, tension-filled film. So cool.
Oh, great. Oh, thanks for watching. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that. Yeah. I'm really happy I was able to get it together to make it. So hard. The hardest is just getting it made, just getting to the point of shooting it. But I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, can't wait to see this next one that you're working on. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else that we missed about Halt and Catch Fire that you want to get in before?
No, it's so cool that people, you know what, like the greatest thrill you can have is that you work so hard on something, and the fact that when once in a while you have something like Ready or Not or Halt and Catch Fire, that it's like, I think people are just going to keep watching that. Like, it's just such a great feeling for everyone working together. When I talk about like Mutiny and we're all there together doing this thing, and it was so exciting, and to know that that's going to continue is like the greatest thing in the world. Because when like work you make doesn't get seen, sometimes you don't care because you're like, that was a great creative process and it was what it was. But ultimately, when you know people are kind of feeling any way that you felt making it is so cool. And I've come around to that way of thinking a bit more of like, you want people to see the stuff you're in, and it's not because you want them to watch you act. It's because you want them to have some inkling of the feeling you were going for and the message you were trying to put out, even if you're a small role. So I just love that. I love how much people really continue on with this show, like yourself. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, I will say, now that I'm putting these videos out, the comments that I'm getting back, I mean, people who are fans of this show are writing novels as long as what I'm speaking in the videos. So it's like people have really thought about this show. And I think that is an ode to the amount of detail that was put into working on the show.
Yeah.
And when you do a deep dive, there's always more to discover, which is the really cool part about talking about Halt and Catch Fire. So
that's so cool. What a cool thing. I'm just so proud I was a part of it, to be honest. Like, so excited, and it's nothing but wonderful memories.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking so much of your time to talk with me about this show today, and just getting a chance to reminisce. I cannot believe how much you remember. It's blowing my mind.
This was like, you know what? I'm walking away on a high that I'm like, I just turned 40 yesterday, and I'm kind of like, oh, cool. I remember stuff. Like, it's not going anywhere yet.
Happy belated birthday. It's all still in there.
Yeah, it's all still in there so far. So no, this is a
birthday gift
as well. And it's fun to reminisce on those things. So no, it's great. I can't believe it either. But here we go.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And to everybody who's watching this, go out there and watch Halt and Catch Fire. Bye, everyone.